Hello, my name is John Colquitt. I'm with the State Department of Education in Alabama. I'm a program specialist, and I've been asked to do a presentation and asked by a lot of the ag teachers and young people that are running for state office in the state of Alabama to assist them with the parliamentary procedure part of running for state office. And I'll begin by saying that you can get in touch with me and ask me further questions if you have some of those. I just thought that this would be a way of getting someone started that wanted to run for state office in FFA to help them with this particular section. Begin too by saying I appreciate my son Caleb Colquitt, who's a former state officer in the FFA, way back when at this point, and I bounced some of the ideas that I have for parliamentary procedure off of him because he was a state officer and he ran for that, but also was on our parliamentary procedure team that won the state and went to national. So it was really good to have him as a resource too, and the production aspect of it that he's taking charge of today and helping me with this is something that if there are other videos that you would like for him to do, you can get in contact with him. I'll have contact information, of course, that you can get in touch with me off the Alabama FFA website. You can get in touch with me there through email, and I'll have my other contact information. If you'd like to get in touch with him to do one of these presentations, it does make it a lot better because then it enables you to be able to have something that's professionally done that's going to last for a long time and to be a resource for a long time. So you can get in touch with Caleb about that. To begin with, first of all, I love parliamentary procedure. I had teams for 20 years. We had a lot of teams with success and really enjoyed it and had a lot of people involved in it. Of course, through those years, I think that we had 20 teams and had 10 of them that went to the Nationals. So we had a lot of success with that. And it was a lot of fun for me to be involved with it. And the reason that I got involved with it is because it helped my program so much, because so many young people were drawn to it. And one of the things about this that I've noticed through the years and with a lot of other agriculture teachers and young people that are running for state office, if they haven't been directly involved with a team and haven't had training in it, it's probably the part or component of running for state office that probably intimidates them the most. And there are a number of reasons for that. And I want you to get to the point that you feel more comfortable with it. Because I think the biggest thing that I would say probably intimidates our people is Robert's Rules of Order. When they get that big, thick book and they look at it and it's written in fine print, and I don't remember how many pages there are, several hundred though, that they are supposed to have knowledge of. I want you to know this to begin with. I never took out that book for a team that I was preparing. I didn't start out with Robert's Rules of Order and say, all right, this is what you need to do. You need to learn this. Because that was an intimidating part of it. That was a bit overwhelming for them. So I didn't want them to begin that way. We started out with debating and then learned the motions, and we'll go through all this. But the purpose of this thing, this presentation today, isn't to prepare a team, but it's to prepare people that are preparing for running for district and state office. As a result of that, I hope that you'll have an understanding that, first of all, you don't have to memorize the book. That's not the purpose of it. That is overwhelming. But we can take the major parts of it, so you'll have a working knowledge of parliamentary procedure, and in so doing, it will enable you to be able to get to the point that you feel more comfortable with it, and it can also be a tool for you as you run for state office or involved in FFA, but not only that, but for the future. I'll say this too. I remember a gentleman that told me one time, he said that he got on the city council in a town and he said, the reason that I was selected for chairman of the city council was because I was the only one on the panel that knew anything about parliamentary procedure. I will say this, as I said for a lot of young people, that when I began this in teaching those that were going to be on the team, is that if you go into any organization, whether it's some kind of organization that you're involved in your community or your church or whatever it may be, you're going to automatically be seen as a leader if you have a working knowledge of parliamentary procedure. Because when you watch organizations do it, and I've seen a lot of organizations do it, and I think FFA does a very good job with it, but I also think that I've seen, as it were, grown folks organizations, boards of education, and other organizations that just make a mess of it because they really don't understand it. So for a state officer, I feel like it's very important. There are a lot of reasons for learning parliamentary procedure for a state officer. First of all, think about the responsibilities that you will have as a state officer that require you to have some knowledge of parliamentary procedure. First of all, there's our delegate meeting. Every year at the state convention, we have a delegate meeting. The president's in charge of that delegate meeting. And they have, of course, the other officers are there too, but he's there to facilitate the business of our organization. And in many instances, the person that's been the president has had difficulty and has had to have a lot of assistance in being able to properly conduct that business. As a result of that, when you sit and think about it, if you've got the president, which is the head of the organization, as it were, to a great degree, directing the work of our organization, as it says in the ceremonies, and he has to have assistants. He has to have people there helping him or her to conduct the business if he's not aware of how it needs to be run. That's not really a good look for the leader of your organization. They need to be able to conduct that in such a way and be in a professional way so they can carry that out. So that delegate meeting is vital. The things that we change in our organization, the things that we add to our organization, that's how they're done, is at our delegate meeting. Another thing that's important is that you're going to represent our state and be one of the delegates for the National FFA Convention. And there again, like the delegate meeting, that's the delegate meeting for our national organization where policy is changed and things are implemented. And having a knowledge of it is a way and a tool to be able to get our student-driven organization policy changes that need to be implemented. So I think it's vital from that standpoint. I've heard a lot of ag teachers through the years that would say, I'm not that concerned about whether they know anything about parliamentary procedure or not. But the way that I would respond to that is this. Look, that's how we go about running our organizations. As a result of that, I get phone calls from people all the time or emails or something like that because I've coached a lot of teams from city council people to county commissions, lots of organizations, ag teachers in different places. They are in leadership positions. As a result, they get in touch with me and ask me questions, which is fine. But having a working knowledge of it is vital. I've had people just recently, they had a big dilemma with their church. And there were some parliamentary regulations that were not carried out and conducted as they should have been. As a result of that, we were looking at a situation where they had to go back and change some things because they did follow Robert's Rules of Order according to their bylaws. So it can be a big part that way. And so you're at the state delegate meeting, at our national convention, which is a big part of being a state officer, and also, of course, it's a part of the process of selecting our state officers. It's a big chunk of carrying it on, like the ag issues and other things that are a part of the selection process for our state officers. So all three of these things are vital, and I think that's why they need to be put into, you need to understand why we go about doing it. So why do we use parliamentary procedure? First of all, if you don't know, I look at this as if you don't know anything about it. So we start from the very basics. First of all, it helps an organization achieve its purpose. It's a way of conducting and carrying out business in a way where it continues to move along and achieve its purpose. Secondly, it provides equal treatment for everyone. Each member has the right to speak. The rules determine the vote, and the vote, every member has a right to vote, and that way the organization is governing itself instead of just a handful of people making all the decisions. It expedites business, saves time. Attendees are not allowed to introduce dilatory issues. The skilled presiding officer keeps that meeting going. And, I've seen meetings where things got bogged down and they weren't accomplishing anything. They debated for an hour, and they're no further along than they were before because they weren't really carrying out Robert's rules that would have expedited that business. In addition, it maintains order. Any organization of any size needs to have order. Can you imagine our delegates meeting where there are hundreds of young people there that are representing our organization at the national level, and if it was chaotic, and it can be sometimes, but if you stick to Robert's rules, it's one of those things that ensures that you're going to continue for those rules to be followed, and a skilled presiding officer can guide that meeting in an orderly way. And it also helps to have knowledgeable members to conduct that business. So that's another advantage to using parliamentary procedure. One vital part of it, in my mind, is it protects the rights of the majority to decide instead of just a handful of people. That business that's brought before the assembly, ultimately in our U.S. system, of course, the way we govern in our government, it's vital for us to have the majority to rule and to make the decisions for the organization. So there are a lot of reasons why we do it. It protects the rights of the minority. The minority has a right to be heard. Whether they're in the majority rule or not on the prevailing side, their views need to be there. Oftentimes, the minority hasn't been listened to in organizations, but parliamentary procedure ensures that right. And they can bring up issues that perhaps hadn't been thought of before. It also protects the rights of all members. Members have the right to make motions, introduce resolutions, to debate, and to vote. All of those things that are important. And these are the kinds of questions that you may be asking. And I'll say that at this point. One of the influences that I hope I have on the state staff for my district and for the state is to have an impact on this part, the kind of questions that they ask. And I'm going to tell them when they start gathering up their questions that this is where they need to go to, because all members that are running for state office have access to this. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Another reason why we use it, it protects the rights of those that are not at the meeting. They could still vote on a particular issue. The minutes of the meeting informs people of the proceedings that are taking place, but those that are absent can also take part in that meeting and make their wishes known too, in case something is transpired and they can't be there. It also helps members understand the universal rules that are useful in any organization. Most organizations adopt Robert's Rules of Order if it's an organization that is put into place to carry out for a length of time. You have to have rules to regulate it. So that's another good reason. And it makes for meetings that members want to attend. There's nothing worse than going to a poorly run meeting where chaos is taking place and nothing's being decided, and you're not able to reach a goal. So as a result of that, I think that it certainly makes meetings a lot better, and they get over faster, and everyone's happier and can get to the refreshments or the meal afterwards or whatever it may be. So I think that's a big part of it, of why we use parliamentary procedure, and those reasons as to why we use it, I think, are important to know. And I hope that you'll have a good attitude about it. I've had some state officers, some young people that were running for state office or were in a state office that would be negative about parliamentary procedure. And they say, well, we don't really use it anyway, but ultimately you do in our organization. And I think, and I'll add this in at this point, I know this much about parliamentary procedure. It certainly helped our young people from our chapter when I was at Marbury. It helped them develop their own leadership and confidence, the ability to be able to communicate. Along with that, I'll mention this point. In my career, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have 9 young people that were state officers. Every one of them were on our parliamentary team. And it really helps young people prepare for interviews with things that have nothing to do with that, but they know how to carry out discussion in a meaningful way that makes them look impressive. And that's a big component of running for state office. So I think all these things as to why we use parliamentary procedure is vital. And remember these things because I think they're important. All right, now we'll get to handling a motion. A main motion is a new item of business, a proposal that's being brought before an assembly to decide upon. And the process of handling motions generally involves these steps that we're going to look at, depending on the motion and the rules of the order in use. So we're going to look at this in detail, and hopefully we'll be able to carry those things out where you can understand them, and it will be easy for you to do. Let's talk about the steps for a main motion, presenting a motion. I've seen people make a mess out of that too. But let's go through the process of how that works. First of all, the member obtains the floor. Now, what that means is he gets the attention of the chairman, whether raising a hand or standing up. He calls and says, Madam Chairman, Mr. President, Madam President, to get the attention of the person in charge of the meeting. And once he's done that, and his name is called on, or the delegate from Alabama, or whatever it may be is called on, and then they can proceed to introduce an item of business, which is a main motion. And then they will say, I move to. That's the proper way of putting it into place. You say, I move to have a car wash as a fundraiser for our FFA. After that, then that motion has to have a second. In other words, there have to be at least two people in that organization, in that assembly, that says, this is worthy of being put on the floor as an item of business for us to discuss and decide upon. So you have to have at least two people to do that. Now, in this main motion, once that second is reached, now that there's been, I've heard statements before, well, the person that seconds the motion has to vote in favor of it. No, he's not saying necessarily I'm in favor of it. All he or she may be saying is that I think this is worthy of being put before the assembly. Right after the second is done, then the chairman states that motion the exact same way that that person put it into the motion form for the assembly. They say it's been moved and seconded that we have a car wash for our FFA for a fundraiser. And as a result of that, then he will say, is there any discussion? Immediately after that, then people can rise, get the attention of the person that is directing the organization, the president or the chairman, and he offers for discussion. Now, each person in the standing rule for debate, each person can debate that motion 2 times. And it can be up to 10 minutes per debate or per discussion. Now, in most instances, they don't last that long. Now, in Congress, they debate all day long sometime, and their rules are different. They don't adopt Robert's rules, but in our organization, going by Robert's rules, 2 times, 10 minutes per debate. And then the chair, after discussion has stopped, if he sees no one else is wanting to vote, and he also, I'll add this in too, the chairperson keeps it going, goes from one person to the other. As a result of that, he also, or she understands that you need to alternate between those that are pro and con. That's one of the things that's cited in Robert's rules that needs to be done. Okay, and then they put it to a vote. One of the things that the chairman has the right to do at that point is there are a number of ways that he or she can go about voting. He puts the question, as it were. He or she will then say, all in favor of us having a car wash? He can say, raise your hand. He can say, stand up. He can say, all say aye. All opposed say no. Those are the proper ways to carry it out. They can also go to a vote with a piece of paper. So you can accurately count those up. If there's something with a great deal of controversy that you want to have a record of, that's time-consuming, but that may be the best way to go about it. And that's kind of up to the chairman. And we'll go through some of that later when we get into some of the other motions further as to how that can be carried out. After that is put to a vote, the chair announces the results of the vote and what happens with the motion. In other words, he says, we will have a car wash fundraiser in our organization. Taps the gavel and moves on. So, as a result of that, that's how you carry out the six steps there to carry out a main motion. And most people can do that with a little practice. It's not that difficult. So that's one of the main things that you will do. Now, moving on to other types of motions. There are several different types. There are different types of motions in Robert's Rules of Order that divides motions into 5 classes, and we're going to look at the 5 classes of motions that we have. First of all, they're the main motions. It's a category in and of itself. As we said before, It's those motions that bring business before the assembly when no other motion is pending. And it's the most common type of motion. A new item of business is going to be decided upon by that organization. So that's a main motion and the various types that we have. All right, so main motion is first, and it's that class of motion. They do bring something else before the assembly. Then you have subsidiary motions. Those are motions which affect the main motion being considered. And you can get a list of those motions in a chart of motions that's easy to find on the internet. There are all kinds of charts there that you can see these broken down into the different classifications, and subsidiary motions is class 2 that we'll look at. Okay, the third class we'll look at are privileged motions. Privileged motions are those that are of such an urgent matter that they must be dealt with immediately. They're vitally important. We're going to look at all of those motions there. Even if they interrupt business, even if you're debating and discussing a particular motion that's important, these privileged motions are classified as those things that are of a higher importance at that moment than the main motion is or other pending motions. Then class 4, incidental motions. Those are the motions which relate in different ways to the business at hand. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's class 4 we'll look at. And then the class 5 is motions that bring motions or a matter back before the assembly again. I'll give you some examples of that. If you lay a motion on the table, then class 5, the motions that bring matters back before the assembly, are motions like take from the table. Motions like rescind. You know, a rescind, and we'll talk about it a little bit later too, but a rescind is a motion to do away with something that's been previously passed, to amend something that has been adopted already, or to reconsider. Maybe a motion failed earlier. There are reasons why it needs to be brought back up again, and you can reconsider that motion. So we have all 5 of those motions there. The main motions, the subsidiary, the privileged, the incidentals, and of course those that bring motions back before the assembly. So all of these are the motions that you'll need to be aware of and know the classifications because they're so different in the way their makeup is and how they're handled. And I always say this to young people. The first thing, if you're going to run for state office, if you're going to be a district officer, I think it's vital for you to know the standard characteristics. Now, that comes from the chart of motions and from Robert's Rules of Order, but typically the best thing that young people can do is learn that chart of motions. Learn all the motions and learn these standard characteristics of them. On that chart, you'll have the motion listed to the side, whether it's fixed time to adjourn, recess, whatever it is, and it will have all these standard characteristics that we're going to discuss about that particular motion at hand that you're looking at. Look it up on the internet. All you have to do is do a search for it, and you can find a chart real easy, and that makes it a lot better than it used to be when I passed out hard copy charts to people. Let's know the standard characteristics. So the first thing we do, standard characteristics, is know the purpose. What does the power of that particular motion, what does it do if it's passed or it's enacted? No matter what the motion is, you need to know the purposes for all of them. Whether it's recess, lay on the table, fixed time to adjourn, whatever it may be, you need to know what that motion does, the power of it. And standard characteristics, one of the things that will be listed there as to whether or not it's debatable. In fact, most motions aren't debatable if they're put in place. So you have a list there of the ones that are debatable and the ones that are not debatable. Now, I'm not going to go down the chart and tell you which ones are debatable and are not debatable at all. That's so easy to look up. That's all you've got to do is just look at that and memorize that chart. Another standard characteristic is amendable. Those motions that can be changed. Most motions can't be amended or changed or an amendment added to them. But some of them are, and you need to know which ones those are. Whether that motion, the third one, is to have a second required. Some motions require a second, some don't, like point of order. You don't have to have a second for that. You stand up and say point of order, the chair will say state your point, and you don't have to have a second for that. Another important standard characteristic, of course, is a vote required. Whether it's a majority vote, 2/3 vote, and a number of them, incidentals in particular, don't have to have a vote at all. The chair makes the decision on that. So that's another of the standard characteristics. Another standard characteristic is whether or not you can interrupt the speaker. You can interrupt the speaker for such an urgent matter, like a point of order. If some rule of parliamentary procedure has been put into place where it isn't valid as it should be, as a result of that, a breach of the rules, you can interrupt the speaker to do that, or a parliamentary inquiry to interrupt the speaker. If you need to know some information that's vital, then you can do a point of information. That's another example. So you've got the interrupt the speaker is one of the standard characteristics. Another one is whether or not it can be reconsidered. A particular item or motion that's put up, if it can be reconsidered or not, brought back before the assembly then. So those things, if we review real quickly, whether it's debatable, amendable, a second required, a vote required for its passage, or whether or not it can interrupt the speaker, or whether it can be reconsidered. And of course, you need to know the purpose for all of them. So all of these things are vital. Now let's look now at the different classifications. We'll start out at the top of the chart there, the privileged motions. A privileged motion is a motion that is granted precedence, or it has more, not more value necessarily, but it is placed in a higher standing than the other motions. So a privileged motion takes precedence over ordinary business because it concerns matters of such a great importance or urgency. Such motions, they're not debatable if they're privileged, although in case of a question of privilege, the chair may feel like there's a need to give some facts about it to the members if that's needed. But those are privileged motions. They take precedence over the ordinary business that takes place, to summarize. So that classification of motions, we're going to look at them individually, but that's an explanation of the privileged motions. All right, so let's look at them for just a moment. Each one of them. First, we have fixed time to adjourn. While another motion is pending, in other words, if there's business on the floor, then fixed time to adjourn is brought up. Let's look at the purpose of it. The purpose of it is this: to adjourn that meeting and to create, in the rules it says, to create a starting time for the next meeting to begin. For example, I'll give you a purpose for it, the way that that's stated. All right, you say, I move that when, Mr. Chairman, you gain recognition. You do have to have recognition for that one. This one does have to have a second. You can look these up on the charts to check me out, make sure I still remember this. It's been quite a while. But you say, I move that when we adjourn to reconvene at 10 o'clock. So you adjourn then and you start back. There are a number of ways to do this particular one. That's just an example that we used when I had teams. So you have an adjourn and then a start time for the next meeting. Well, that's the most important thing. That's why it's at the top of the list. And as a result of that, you end that meeting, and where the business is pending, that has an impact on it, but that fixed time to adjourn is important, and it's the highest ranking one. All right, the second one there, which makes sense, follows in kinship to it, is an adjourn. An adjourn, simply put, most of us know this, ends a meeting. It stops that meeting until it's time for it to come, for the organization to start back again. But if there's not another motion on the floor, then it loses its privileged status, just like it does with a fixed time to adjourn. So an adjourn simply ends a meeting. And it's simply put, just one little statement, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, they gain recognition and they say, I move to adjourn after they gain recognition. If there's a second, then you go directly to a vote when it's privileged, and it's conducted at that point. So that's an adjourn. That's pretty simple. All right, recess is handled almost the same way. It ranks third. And you can look at all of the different characteristics there on a chart of motions. But all a recess does is stop a meeting for a brief period of time. It stops that, and it's going to come back in. For example, I'll give you an example of that. Mr. Chairman, the chair recognizes whomever, and then they say, I move to recess for 10 minutes. Okay? And then they go directly to a vote. Typically, a recess is done because there's something urgent that has transpired where you need a recess. And a lot of times a reason will be given. They'll say, due to the controversy on this motion and we need to have some additional information about it, I move we recess for 10 minutes. So as a result of that, that's the recess motion, to take a break for a short period of time, which is the purpose of it. All right, a question of privilege. Now, question of privilege is unique in that it is such an urgent matter that it can interrupt a speaker right in the middle of someone's debate. It may be a rude thing to do, but it is certainly doable at that point. But you're proposing something that is such an urgent nature and out of the ordinary that needs to be brought up for the chair to decide on. So that's the purpose of it. The way you state the motion is very simple. You get up and say, question of privilege. And automatically that chairman, whether someone is talking or not, recognizes that privileged motion has to be dealt with right then. As a result of that, he will or she will say, state your question. And the person, the example that we used to give, because organizations in many instances require that members, for example, be in official dress during the meetings. And an easy one for us to do was the jacket, having to have on an FFA jacket. You stand up and say, question of privilege. The chair says, state your question. And the mover of that motion says, Mr. Chairman, I feel like it's getting warm in here. We need to take our jackets off, and the members of the assembly would be more comfortable. And the chairman then makes a ruling on that at that particular motion. One of the reasons we did this, too, is because we used it to set up some other motions. So it made it real easy in our team competition. But there are a number of things that you can do with the question of privilege. Then the last one in the privilege list is orders of the day, a call for orders of the day. The purpose of that motion is if an organization has gotten away from the various, the agenda that has been put into place that they're supposed to follow, then what you can do is call for orders of the day. You just stand up without recognition. You say, I call for orders of the day. And the chairman goes straight to a vote. And this one's a unique vote, too, because it's 2/3 not to follow the agenda that's been previously set. So he would do it like this. I call for orders of the day. The chairman would say, orders of the day have been called for, requiring us to go to the previously set agenda. As a result of that, then you would take a vote as to whether or not you would continue with the line of discussion that you're on or go by the orders of the day, which is a 2/3 not to follow. So that covers orders of the day. So those are the privileged motions that we have. And if you have any questions about those in more detail, you can certainly get in touch with me about that. All right. There are also secondary motions or subsidiary motions. They're ranked highest to lowest in order of precedence on the chart. There are 13 ranking motions. We did those 5 privileged motions. Now we'll go to the secondary subsidiary motions. All right. The first one we'll go to here is lay on the table. That is to suspend consideration of a main motion and any pending subsidiary motions to allow for immediate consideration of more urgent business. If you look up the definition of it, that's what it will say. All right, a lay on the table allows you to set that motion aside for a short period of time, most of the time, short period of time so you can take care of that urgent situation that has arisen. And it should be a good reason, too. I think in my time in watching people use motions and parliamentary procedure, I think this is one of the most abused motions there is. They'll move to lay the motion on the table until their next meeting, which might be a year from now. And that's not the purpose of that motion. A lay on the table is done so that item of business, that main motion that's on the floor, can be picked right back up and brought back before the assembly. A lay on the table motion is real easy to do, but the intent of it is important to remember, to just set a motion aside for a short period of time. So that's the purpose of it. All you have to do is, you do have to have recognition. You can't interrupt the speaker. You stand up and say, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, you're called upon or recognized, and then what you do is you say, I move to lay the pending question on the table. If it gets a second, then it will go to a vote. This one isn't debatable. Now, I'll reflect back on this a little bit, just a little side story. I saw a Parley Pro team that got away with it too. They actually debated a lay on the table motion, which was a breach of the rules, and they didn't catch it. But so those kinds of things can happen. But so a lay on the table motion is an easy one to do, really. But it's important to remember the purpose of it. All right, a previous question. Now, the purpose of this is to close debate for any further amendments or anything and to vote immediately. In other words, let's say, for example, a member has been sitting there and debate has gone on and on and on, and we've heard the same points over and over again. This is one of those motions with the ability to be able to speed up or expedite business in an assembly when you're conducting business. So the previous question allows you to do that. You call for previous question, which ends debate immediately. That person will then state that motion, says, previous question has been called for, demanding that we go to the vote immediately. All those in favor, please rise. And typically you do a 2/3, since it's a 2/3 vote, you want an easy way to be able to count it. So that's not a good one to do a voice vote on. That's a hint for chairman. So you have a rising vote or counting vote of some way where you can count the numbers, because you've got a 2/3 there with the numbers in the assembly. That's why you would go to a standing vote in most instances. And then once that previous question has been brought before the assembly, has passed, then you immediately go for a vote and the debate ends. So that's the power of a previous question. The next one on the list there of subsidiary motions is limit or extend limits of debate. Remember I said earlier that each member is allowed to debate a motion 2 times. And each debate can be 10 minutes. Well, if it's going too long, if a member feels like the same points are being made over and over again, and you need to expedite business further and carry it on to get the business over with, then what you can do is limit, or you can extend debate. You can change the standard debate, essentially, is what you're doing. So change it from those numbers of times or the time limit on that debate. So that's the purpose of it. And this is just an example, and there are a lot of ways you could go about doing it. We said it like this. Mr. Chairman, the chair recognizes Joe. Then Joe says, I move that we limit debate to 5 minutes per speaker. You could also, and once you get a second, then you go directly to a vote on that. And it requires a 2/3 vote, because anything that limits the rights of the members with regard to discussion is going to take more than a majority to take away that member's rights. Because remember what we stated earlier, members' rights are protected in parliamentary procedure. So stating that motion, the chairman would then say, it's been moved and seconded to limit the debate to 5 more minutes. And once you vote on that, the result of the vote is then stated, and you either limit the debate, but you can extend debate. Remember that. It's the same thing, really. I move that we extend the debate to 10 more minutes per person, something like that. More than 10 minutes per person, however you want to do it, because it's the right of that assembly to make sure that that transpires in the right way, and the will of the assembly is what conducts the business. So limit or extend debate. Another one is postpone. Postpone to a certain time, or it's also called postpone definitely. All right, this puts off a motion to a later time, a specified time. And one of the things that the chairman should do in this particular motion, if a member does a postpone, is they have to set the time for which it will be postponed to, or else it kind of loses its power. So you could, at that point, if you wanted to do a postpone indefinitely, although that does have a little bit of a different power to it and intent of it, but the way that you go about it is, and its purpose is to put the decision off on that motion for various reasons. Okay. And that is a debatable motion. You can debate a postpone. So once you get to debate, then you can talk about the pros and cons of why that motion should either be decided on or postponed. So that's the purpose of it, to put that motion off to a later time. So the way you would go about doing that, the person would say, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman, he would state his or her name and say, I move that we postpone this motion until our next regularly scheduled meeting. It gets a second, and then you debate it. The pros and cons as to whether or not it needs to be decided upon immediately or when the specified time is for the postpone. So that's the way that one's conducted, a postpone to a certain time or postpone definitely. Another one is to commit or refer to a committee. Now, the purpose of this one is simple. It sends the main motion and any pending subsidiary motions to it to a group for consideration. Now, as far as the chairman is concerned, I noticed in my years of doing this that this was one of the more difficult ones for young people to do. But once you learn how to do it, it's not that difficult. It needs to include the criteria that's found in Robert's Rules of Order in it if you're the chairman. So how you would know it, or for a member to propose it. So it's one of those things that you need to have that criteria there. You would do it this way. Mr. Chairman, chair recognizes John. Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer this motion to a committee of 3 appointed by the chair to report back at the next meeting. And then that motion gets a second, and then you debate whether or not it goes to a committee. Now, there's some things in there that we did with our teams to make sure that they were doing them correctly. You notice how we did that to include all the criteria. Move to refer to a committee, and then the person said of 3, you could say 5, you could say 7, you could say whatever you want to say, to have that motion put to that committee. So you designate the number of people on it. Also, you designate how many people are on that committee. Not only on it, but how it's also to be carried out by the chair, or another way of deciding who's on that committee. And remember, that organization, that assembly, has a right and a say-so as to how that is conducted. He could say, for example, by 3 volunteers. If they decide to do it that way, then certainly that's one of the ways it can be done. So refer to a committee, and you need to know the reasons why we have a committee. A lot of times it's to gain other information, to do research, to find out things as to why that motion should or should not pass. So that's vital to know. And oftentimes that committee that reports back and goes directly to a vote on that after they make their report enables you to know the pros and cons of a particular motion that would be set up. So commit or refer to a committee. The next one is postpone indefinitely. All right, this is to end consideration of that main motion for the balance of that session without a direct vote on that main motion. And there's a phrase here that you'll hear associated with it oftentimes. It essentially kills the motion. Now, sometimes people will put up a postpone indefinitely just to see what people's feelings are in that assembly about the main motion, to see whether or not it's going to pass or not. It's a tool that way. But a postpone indefinitely essentially kills that motion. Okay, so as far as stating it is concerned, you have a motion on the floor. You want to see whether or not it has the intent of the assembly. In other words, if people are in favor of it or not. And so you stand up and say, I move to postpone this motion indefinitely. And then it gets a second. And then you debate whether or not that should transpire and vote on it with a majority vote. So that explains pretty much the postpone indefinitely. It's easy to present. Then an amend. Now, everyone is familiar probably with an amend. An amend is just a change in the main motion in some way. May also be applied to other certain motions too. You can apply it to, for example, a fixed time to adjourn. You can amend that motion's time or something other. There are other motions that can be amended besides a main motion. But or recess, for example. You can move to amend the motion by striking out the word 5 minutes and putting in 10 minutes if someone thinks they need more time. So there are a lot of motions that it applies to, but when we consider it with a main motion, it changes something about that motion, adds something to it. Strike out, add, insert are ways that you can state that in the proper way and to let people know what you're trying to do with the amend that you are proposing. All right, so an amend, it changes the motion. Now, there are a multitude of ways to amend, and amend can be kind of complicated, especially when you get into amending paragraphs or inserting paragraphs and certain things like that. Let's talk about an amend just a minute. A couple of the standard characteristics about it that are vital. Of course, it's debatable and it's a majority vote and it requires a second, all of those things, and you know the power of it. But one of the things, too, is you can only make 2 amendments on a main motion. You can't continue to add amendments to it, like I've seen some people do before. They had 3 or 4 amendments on that, and that's not something that you need to change the whole motion if there's that many things that need to be changed about it. But a standard way of doing it is something like this. Let's say the motion on the floor is to have a car wash that we talked about earlier for your FFA, for the organization. Okay, you say, I move that we have an FFA car wash, and you start debating whether or not to have a car wash. Then someone decides, well, if we're going to do this, we need to have a date for it. Someone then stands up and says, Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend the motion by adding on the words on September the 15th. And it gains a second, and then you debate the amend as to whether or not. So you kind of go backwards with this. You debate the amend first and then go back to the main motion as it's been changed. So that's a way of going about doing an amend, which is a typical motion that's commonly done. All right, then we'll go to the incidental motions. This is another class of motions. We went through the 13 ranking motions of privileged and subsidiary. Now let's look at the incidental motions. Now the incidental motions are motions that relate to, in varying ways, to the main motions and other parliamentary motions. And there are a number of them to carry out and conduct. Now, we'll look at them, and some of them are complex and some of them not so much. All right, we'll look at the first one there, this listed. There is no rank among these, but this is just one of the ones that they put at the top of the list typically. And we'll start out with the one that may be perhaps the most confusing of all of them, but it's appeal the decision of the chair. All right, that chair makes a decision on a particular item, and if someone thinks that it's an incorrect decision, you see, the chairman is not, he's the chairperson, she's the chairperson, they're not the dictator. They don't stand up and dictate everything that goes on in an organization. In fact, the best chairman is the one that's not giving his opinion much at all, and he's not trying to dictate things, he's just trying to facilitate things. But if there's something that someone in the assembly decides that, that wasn't a good decision, or he didn't do that right, she didn't do that right. So all it is you're trying to change the decision of the chair. Just like any other kind of appeal. I used to tell my young people, just like you can appeal a traffic ticket. You'll probably lose, but you can appeal that. All you're trying to do is get them to change their decision as to whether or not you were actually speeding or ran a red light or whatever it might have been. So it's a change in decision. Now, this one can interrupt the speaker, and in the assembly, when a breach has been made, according to the person's opinion, they just stand up and say, I appeal from the decision of the chair. And then the chairman will say, state your appeal. And then they'll state why they think that an incorrect decision or ruling was made. So you stand up and say, I appeal from the decision of the chair. You say, state your appeal. From the question of privilege earlier, example, I feel the member should be able to take off his jacket because many of us in here are hot. So you go ahead, the chairperson can state the reason why he or she thinks that should be the decision, and it is debatable, so members of the assembly, but they can only debate it one time. As a result of that, they carry out the appeal from the chair and do that. So the decisions of the chair are not always final. You can appeal those decisions. All right, another incidental motion is division of the question. Now, the division of the question is actually, the power of it is to take a motion, a main motion, and to split it into 2 or more parts. Now, you can't start splitting it up into several different parts, but the division of the question motion is a way of, for example, splitting it. Say you're in favor of the main motion itself, but you disagree with the date, for example. I'll give you an example of this, and we'll state a motion. I move that we have a car wash on October the 1st. Second, you start debating it. All right? Someone in the assembly says, well, we've got a football game on October the 1st, or we have a livestock show, or we have a dance that we're supposed to go through that's associated with the school, or we have a place, we've selected a place where it's not available that day, whatever it may be. But here's how you go about doing it. Let's say, go back to the car wash thing and say, I move that we divide the question into two parts so as to consider separately the motion to have a car wash and the motion to have a car wash on October the 1st. It's seconded. And then you go directly to the vote on that. And as a result, you decide whether or not in that assembly, if you divide it or you keep it as one complete motion. So that motion many times is something that's necessary and needed because you need to change some things about it. All right, another one is division of the assembly. Now, this one's really easy to do. My students used to like doing it because it's so simple, and they got credit for it for doing it. All right, motions that are relating to nominations, motions relating to methods of voting and polls and all of those kinds of things is what it applies to. All right, if you've got to vote on something, and there's a question as to whether it was pro or con, positive or negative, and you can't really determine the outcome of it by a voice vote, for example, it's a way of requiring another vote. So you can force another way of voting. Let's say you do a voice vote. The chairman says, it's been moved, and you've had discussion. All in favor of us having a livestock show on September the 1st, say aye. Some of them say aye. All opposed say no. About half of them say no. And he says the motion carries. And then someone says, I don't know which way that went. So they say division. That's all you have to do. There's no second, nothing else. That chairman will go automatically to a vote and say all those in favor of voting again will go to the vote. All in favor of having the livestock show on September the 1st, please rise. And you count those that are voting there. All opposed, please rise. You count those, and then you're able to accurately carry out that vote with the division of the assembly. All right, another incidental motion is object to the consideration of the question. Now, the purpose of this motion is to take a motion off the floor that someone in the assembly decides shouldn't even be on the floor at all. And it has to be done before discussion begins. Once that discussion begins, then it's in ownership of the assembly. So you have to object to it very, very quickly. And it was a hard one to do because you had to do the timing right on it. But the purpose of it is to do away with a highly objectionable motion. All right? So the way you go about doing it, you don't have to have recognition from the chair. You just simply stand up and say, I object to the consideration of the question. And then the chairman goes into that and says, consideration of the question has been objected to. Shall the question be considered? All in favor of considering the question, please rise. And they'll take a vote. All opposed, please rise. You notice there, because it's a 2/3 vote to take that motion off the floor, you do a rising vote. That just makes more common sense. So that's an important aspect of it. So you can do away with a motion. And I'll give you an example of this. I say, well, why would you want to take a motion away? Let's say, for example, that you do a motion like this, and you say, Mr. Chairman, someone puts this motion up. I move that we provide $2,000 for our members to go to the National FFA Convention. Second, they start debating it. They get ready to start debating. Let's say the treasurer of the organization says, hey, we don't have $2,000. And he stands up and says, I object to the consideration of the question. That's a really good reason, because if you don't have the money in the account to pay for it, then you don't need to pass the motion. So that's a good tool to take away something that's highly objectionable. All right, another incidental motion, fifth one we've covered, is point of order. All right, that is a motion where you think there's been a breach in the rules. In other words, something has transpired that does not follow Robert's Rules of Order or the protocol of the organization. So you stand up and say point of order. Okay, and so it's really easy to do, but you have to be able to state your point. You rise up and say point of order. The member will state his point. Mr. Chairman, you didn't receive a second on that last motion. And then the chairman makes a ruling on that. Let me say something about the point of order. Point of order is one of those things that's always cited in the minutes. And one of the reasons it's cited in the minutes is because that point of order is in effect and can be changed back to something going way back in time. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the parliamentarians that I know worked for an organization, and he was their assigned parliamentarian, and he's always the example that I've given to young people. I know that he was a parliamentarian for this organization. He did their national organizations. He was the person that was ruling because he was so knowledgeable about it. And I know that he did a 3-day stint for this organization, and he made $10,000 for being a parliamentarian for 3 days. So that's pretty good when you've got that kind of knowledge and can do that. But that's the purpose of it, is to do away with a rule that you think's been breached. And that chairman will then decide on that and make rulings. And that's one of the things that a chairman has to be knowledgeable of the rules so he can rule or she can rule on the points of order. All right, suspend the rules. You have rules that govern an organization, and you can suspend a particular rule. It requires a 2/3 vote. You have to have recognition for it, but it does away with a standing rule or some type of rule. So you would stand up and say, Mr. Chairman, you would get recognition and say, I move that we suspend the rules that require members to be in official dress during the meetings for this particular meeting. And then you go through and you don't debate it, you vote on it immediately for whatever reason. So it isn't that difficult to state, but you have to be careful about what kinds of rules you are suspending, because there are rules that govern that. But that's a suspend the rule. All right, another one is parliamentary inquiry or point of information. They're sort of the same thing, and you do both of them the same way. If you have a question about something that relates to the business with regard to parliamentary procedure, one of the ones we used to do, and you don't have to have recognition, there is no vote on it, the chairman just makes a ruling on it. So you stand up and say parliamentary inquiry, and the chairman will say, what is your inquiry? And you would say, for example, what's the vote requirement on the orders of the day? And then the chairman would say 2/3 not to follow, or whatever the motion may be. So that's a request to do that in the parliamentary inquiry, just getting information or point of information. How much longer is it until the meeting is supposed to be over? There may be a set time on that meeting, and that can be a point of information, or any other thing. And there's things you can look up in Robert's Rules as an example. All right. Another one is withdraw. Now, withdraw a motion is difficult to do, really, if you do it in the right way. Now, only the person can only withdraw their own motion. If they decide that it's a bad idea that they put out there, and people make bad decisions a lot of times. So, for example, if you put up the motion to have a car wash, and you said, I move that we have a car wash on October the 1st, 2nd. And then you have to do it very quickly. It's a little complicated. You have to stand up and say, Mr. Chairman, I move to withdraw my motion. And then if he says, is there anyone that objects to the member withdrawing his motion? And most of the time they're silent. If the motion maker isn't in favor of having his own motion, then in most instances they will say, okay, yeah, well, if he doesn't think it's a good idea and he just proposed it, then it's probably not. And you're supposed to do that before debate, because once the debate starts, then the ownership is of the assembly. They actually have it. To start with, it's the mover's motion. He has ownership. She has ownership. Then you move to, if you get into discussion, then he has nothing to do with it at that point, the power to take it away, unless there is an object that's done by another organization. Remember this about parliamentary procedure. There are a lot of rules, standard rules that work in most instances. But typically there are exceptions to almost any rule if you have the right procedure to go through. So keep that in mind. These incidental motions, unlike the privileged and subsidiary motions, have no order of precedence. If I didn't mention that earlier, it's vital that you remember that part of it. There's not one if a point of order and one of the other motions is in play there, then you need to know that there isn't one that has precedence over the other one. It has a higher value over the other one. Now let's look at the other classification, our last classification, which would be ranked on your chart there, are motions that bring motions back before the assembly. Sometimes you need to bring motions back, especially this first one. Bring it back before the assembly to make a decision on that. And the first one we'll look at is take from the table. We said earlier that you lay a motion on the table to pick it back up later. Well, this is the motion that enables you to do that. There wasn't a set time with the lay on the table, so once this motion is made, a lot of times it's the person that made the motion, and they'll want to take it back up. And all you have to do at that point is say, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I move that we take the motion from the table to have a car wash on October the 1st. It gets a second, and then you make a decision on that motion. Remember, it's already been debated on one time, and it was brought when it was laid on the table. So you go ahead and make a decision on that and then debate the topic, the main motion itself, if it passes. So that's how that is carried out. So I move to take the motion from the table. So that's a motion that brings motions back before the assembly. Another one is a rescind. And a rescind does away with something that was previously passed. Now, there are rules that govern this one. If you want to rescind, you have to have voted on the prevailing side. For example, if you voted the other way with it, you have to be in favor of having that rescind done. It's easy to state. You do it like this. You say, Mr. Chairman, I move to rescind the motion that we passed earlier to have a car wash on October the 1st. If it gets a second, to do away with something that's previously passed, it requires a 2/3 vote for its passage to do away that motion. Maybe perhaps you say, well, why would they want to do that? Well, things can happen and arise where you can no longer do a particular event. Let's say you were going to have an event at school. You're going to have a bonfire at school. And you passed it. The principal said, you can't have one. Just won't allow it. As a result of that, you may have to rescind it. Because, and I'll mention this here, there's one thing that you can't do, and it seems kind of silly, but it's still true. The laws of the land always supersede whatever an organization passes. It doesn't make any difference what it is. I used to use this, and it was a silly example. You can't have a motion to do away with a particular member or punish a particular member for a reason. You can't do that. It circumvents the laws of the country, so since that's a violation, and you can't do that. So that's one of those things, too, that needs to be held in your mind. No matter what you decide to do, the laws of the Constitution or the state or even a board, you can't supersede those laws in an organization because they are above that. So, but that's a rescind, to do away with a previously passed motion. All right, reconsider, let's say a motion failed. Some things changed about it in some way. As a result of that, those things that changed, maybe you need to bring that motion back before the assembly so it can pass. Maybe there's a reason for that. So the way you go about doing it is you state whatever that motion is. You say, Mr. Chairman, you gained recognition. Say, I move to reconsider the motion to have a livestock show on September the 1st. Gains a second. You can debate that motion. As a result of it, then you decide whether or not to bring it back before the assembly, and then if it's passes and is brought back, then you make a decision on that main motion. So that doesn't pass it, but it does bring it back before the assembly. So as a result of that, we've gone through a lot of things here, and I remember this, as far as preparing for state office is concerned, understand that the standard characteristics, the purposes of the motion, that's what's vital. Bringing those motions up, knowing the standard characteristics, and like I said earlier, I'm going to attempt to have an influence on it, and hopefully we'll ask good questions that have a definitive answer to. Because we don't want to get into a situation where there's a gray area, whether it's on the test or whether it's a verbal question that you're asked in parliamentary procedure. I'll give you an example of what I used to ask, and it blew some of their minds. When I was on the nominating committee, one of the questions that I asked right off the bat was, okay, and I set it up like this, so you'll know how sometimes the nominating committee really tries to put you on your toes. And I said, you know, this is how I would do it. I'd say, okay, first of all, what office would you like to have? And in most instances, the young people will say, I want to be president. I said, well, that's good. High aspirations, that's what we'd like to see for you to be president. And I say, okay, so well, if you want to be president, it's important for you to know parliamentary procedure. And they would, don't you agree? And they say, yes. I say, okay, name me in order the 13 ranking motions. And I think about 10 out of 12 of them, their jaw dropped. And they didn't have a clue. They didn't know where to start, where to finish, where to begin. They didn't know the motions at all. And it's not always like that. But I will say this. Knowing that the standard characteristics, knowing the purposes of the motions, knowing the ranking of the motions, whether they're debatable, amendable, and all of those kinds of things, to have a working knowledge of those motions is vital. Because if you're going to be a state officer, you need to know how to run a meeting at your chapter, at the district, certainly at the state. When you are the person that is going to represent our state at the nationals, to know what to do in a delegates meeting. Remember, all those things are vital. Now, as I said earlier, you can get in touch with me, John Colquitt. I'm on the state staff there. Go to alabamaffa.org, and as a result, you can go to the contact section, get my phone number. You can get my email address there, and it's not that difficult to get in touch with me at all. If you have any questions about that, not only will we have Alabama students looking at this, but I know some in Florida, too, that I've had in livestock shows. They've asked me to do this too, so they'll be looking for that, and anyone across the country that needs something. Now, if I've made a mistake on this, I'll be glad to correct it. There may have been something I said. And you have to remember, it's been about 6 years since I had a team myself. I've had another job, so I haven't been directly related to it, but this is hopefully a good fundamental presentation for you to look at that will really help you, and you can back it up and go forward, whatever you need to do. But there are a lot of other videos out there too. I just hope this will be beneficial to you, and you can get in touch with me for any other questions that you might have. And it doesn't just have to be those in my district. I'll help any young person that asks me for help with it. And hopefully we'll be able to, this will be beneficial to you, and good luck in running for state office. And I hope everything goes well with you. Thank you.